Hi everyone, this is Arcadius and welcome back to Naval Creed. Today we'll be going over another video of Stats Clash. This time it is for Matchmaking Tier 2 Battleships. There's not many of them, there's only 3 of them, and you can only actually get one of them in the tech tree. But they do play an important part of this tier because of just how weak the other ships are in compared to them. That doesn't necessarily mean that these battleships are strong, it's just everything looks a lot weaker when compared to them. So we'll explain what that means in a minute, but the 3 ships we'll be going over today are Mikasa, which is right here. We have Kawachi, which is the only one you can actually get in the tech tree. This one's an event ship. And the last one is also an event ship, that is the French pre-dreadnought Danton. So each one of these ships are not exactly fun to play. I do not have Mikasa, since I was not able to get her during the event that she was available in. So some of the stats for this ship are currently unknown, at least game-wise. I can kind of infer what they might be based on comparative information, but for actual definitive information, I don't have those numbers. But I have quite a few numbers for the ship, so we'll be able to be pretty well off without that. Yeah, pretty much these are just really slow ships that have 12-inch guns, and they just kind of waddle around at their slow speed and try and do as much damage as they can with inaccurate gunfire. But each of these are fairly important at this tier, so let's start by going over the general stats. So Mikasa has the most health at 46,900 points, and Danton has the lowest at 35,800, so that's over 11,000 damage or health point difference, which is actually pretty substantial. That's a quarter of the entire ship. Torpedo damage resistance, Mikasa has the most at 20%, while Kawachi and Danton have 12% only. Belt armor, Kawachi and Danton have 12 inches. I don't know Mikasa's because I don't have her unlocked, but according to online sources, she has about 9 inches of belt armor instead of 12. Either way, I don't really have a problem with any of the armor here. In fact, Mikasa might have the best armor. I don't think I've ever been able to Citadel her. Kawachi, definitely. Danton, I think so as well. I don't really play her that often, and the only time I would come across her in a game is if I actually play Danton. So that's questionable, but I think Mikasa's armor is actually the best in game at this tier. Like, in play, it's the best. That doesn't necessarily mean that the numbers are the best. Turning circle radius, Kawachi and Danton are both 580 meters, while Mikasa's 550 meters. She can turn relatively okay. However, speed, Mikasa is the slowest, with Kawachi the fastest, but only a difference of 2 knots. Not really anything important. All of them are pretty slow at this tier. And surface detectability, Mikasa is pretty high at 11.5, and Kawachi and Danton are the same at 9.5. And then Mikasa actually is better air detectability at 7.1, and Kawachi and Danton at 8.3. Remember, the only aircraft you're really going to see is a Kawachi float plane at this tier. There's not much more. You don't really see any carriers until tier 4. So that wraps up for the general stats. Mikasa has a lot of health and torpedo percent, damage resistance, good maneuverability, but slow speed and high detectability. Alright, for the guns themselves. Each one of the ships has 305mm guns, that's 12-inch. However, Mikasa and Danton have a twin turret forward and a stern, so for a total of 4 guns. But Kawachi has 2 wing turrets on each side, so that has a total of 8 guns on a broadside. And what is that? 12 guns total. So you can kind of see how Kawachi might be a little bit better in terms of straight main gun firepower, but you might be surprised in some areas as well. Alright, so start off with Mikasa and Kawachi actually have the same kind of guns. They have the same 180-degree turn time, rate of fire, 30-second reload, same HE damage, which is actually pretty decent at 7,150. That's actually really good. Fire percent is 25.8%, HE piercing is 50 millimeters, HE velocity is 810, armor piercing is 7400, AP velocity is also 810, but the number of shells you can fire and the number of fires you can cause are different. So Mikasa can fire a maximum of 8 shells per minute with a possible number of fires of 2, HE alpha of 28,600, and armor piercing alpha of 29,600, where Kawachi can actually fire 16 shells on a broadside per minute with a possible 4 fires, 57,200 HE alpha, which is really decent at this tier, and then armor piercing of 59,200. So Kawachi becomes pretty much untouchable in terms of damage alpha because of those 2 extra turrets, or the wing turrets that you have on each side. It's pretty much 2 Mikasas or 2 Dantons on each side, so there's always going to be a difference there. However, Danton has slightly different stats. She has the same kind of guns, the 12-inch. Her turn time for 180 degrees is a little bit longer. Same rate of fire, 30 seconds. Her HE damage is only 5,900. Fire chance is lower at only 23.4. Same amount of millimeters of HE piercing. HE velocity is actually faster by 40 meters per second at 850, but you don't really notice it all that much. Armor piercing damage is actually better per shell as well at 8,700. However, your velocity is only 780, so you're actually slower by 30 meters per second. Honestly, though, I don't really use armor piercing on Danton. If you're going to use any kind of shell for any of these battleships, I would think it'd be high explosive. And I'll explain why that is in a moment. Number of shells per broadside is 8, and due to her lower fire chance, she actually only has a probable chance of 1 fire. Or per minute. High explosive alpha is 23,600, which is the lowest by, well, 5,000 compared to Mikasa, and even more when you compare it to Kawachi. But your armor piercing alpha is actually more than the Mikasa at 34,800. So it's a difference of about 5,200 there, so a little bit better there. So like I said, I don't have Mikasa, so I can't really say much on her guns, but if they're exact same as Kawachi's, which I think they are, all you want to do is fire high explosive, because it doesn't matter what you're going to shoot, you're going to set lots and lots of fires. And the possible number of fires that I mentioned here do not include secondaries either. And that may not also be the best way of showing how many fires, because I played a game right before this just so I could figure out some other information about the ship. I was able to get 20 fires in Kawachi, and even with Danton I was able to get like 15 or so between secondaries and main guns. So definitely she's a very good fire starter, and so is Danton. But with Danton, that's mainly because you only have 4 guns. Even if you use armor piercing, it's not really gonna do enough, because the armor piercing alpha is showing citadel hits, and you're not always going to get citadels. So yeah, mainly I just use all of these ships as high explosive spammers to the best degree that they can, with only 4 guns pretty much, besides Kawachi. And then you also have your secondaries to help light fires as well. Fires are going to be your best friend of this tier, because armor piercing is either going to roll right through the ship and not do anything, or it will do something, but maybe not a citadel. Going to the gun ranges themselves, Danton has the farthest range main weaponry of battleships at 12 kilometers, which isn't really that much, but it's a lot for this tier. Mikasa is a close second at 11.8, and then Kawachi is a dreadful 9.7. There's actually cruisers that can shoot farther than Kawachi, quite a few of them actually. So the gun range is absolute trash. And you have to remember, even though these are matchmaking tier 2 battleships, these ships are actually tossed into matchmaking tier 3 games as well. So you're going up against Wyomings and Dreadnoughts and Nassaus, so it only gets worse from here, at least for Kawachi. However, Kawachi does have the farthest shooting secondaries at 4.4 kilometers, Danton at 4.0, and Mikasa at a very small 3.0 kilometers. Now, some of these ships actually have different secondaries, and here they are. Mikasa has 7 secondaries on the broadside of 6-inch caliber, or 152 millimeter. These shoot armor-piercing shells, which actually can be quite useful against cruisers, because that's just large enough to actually citadel them, or at least I would think so. So Mikasa might be very dangerous to any cruiser that gets within 3 kilometers. And then she also has 8 secondaries per broadside of 3-inch caliber or 76 mil that fire high explosive. These are dangerous against destroyers. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that she only has, like, what is this, 15 secondaries. This is just per side. So she has an entire opposite side as well. I think she has like 30 secondaries or something like that. Kawachi has 11 secondaries per side of 6-inch caliber. These only fire high explosive, but like I said a moment ago, they are actually pretty decent at setting fires, so no complaints there, honestly. You don't really want to be close enough for high or secondary spamming, but then again, your range and accuracy kind of force you into that. So just be mindful of your angle, but even then, your armor is so squishy. Kawachi is probably one of the worst battleships if you're going to be going up against another battleship. It's pretty much just a cruiser crusher, and that's how you should play her, because if you see a battleship, most of the time you just want to try and run and send some high explosive downrange, because there's no way you're going to win a real battle with a battleship. Or not easily, I should say. Danton also has 2 types of secondaries. She actually has the largest secondaries in the game currently. She has 3 twin 9.4-inch guns or 240mm turrets. Those are all on the wings. They fire high explosive, only up to 4 kilometers though, so kind of limited there. And then she also has 8 single 75mm or 3-inch high explosive casemate secondaries as well. So yeah, Danton's 9.4-inch guns are actually the only ones that are mainly turrets. I think Kawachi has 4 of her 6-inch guns arranged in gun mounts, not casemates, but for actual turrets, Danton is the only one that has those. So in terms of secondaries, Mikasa is pretty decent with her armor-piercing secondary 6-inch. And then Danton's 9.4-inch, you can actually, I've had games where I've been able to get like 3,000 damage in one shot from one of the 9.4-inch guns. So they're not terribly useless. And like I said, you're mainly looking for high explosive and fire damage here, setting fires. Alright, now that brings us to anti-aircraft defense. Now, like I said, you're only really going to see a Katori float plane. There's really not that much at this tier, but Mikasa is determined to shoot down anything that isn't there with 62 total damage of anti-aircraft defense. For whatever reason, she has the most at this tier. 26 was at about 4.5 kilometers, I think, and then 20 DPS at 3 and 16 at 1.2. Kawachi has a whole 4 damage at 3 kilometers, and then Danton has absolutely 0 AA guns and no damage at all. So yeah, if Mikasa ever comes across any aircraft, she can at least shoot some down, but you really will not shoot anything down because there's no aircraft. Pretty much worthless. Alright, consumables. Considering I don't have Mikasa, I can't see what consumables she has, so those are all question marks at this time. However, Kawachi has a 10-second duration for damage control party with a reload or cooldown of 80 seconds with unlimited charges. However, Danton has an 18-second damage control party duration, again with an 80-second cooldown and unlimited uses. And then they both have 30-second heal duration and 80-second cooldown and 4 charges for that as well. And that pretty much goes over all information for the Tier 2 battleships. And now we're going to do a quick review on all Tier 2 ships. So this is focusing on the main points or the important points of the Tier 2 destroyers, cruisers, and battleships and comparing them and ranking them, kind of. And so we're going to start off with health points. So purple is going to designate a battleship, blue is going to designate a cruiser, and red is for a destroyer. And that will be important in further pictures here. So Mikasa has the most health at 46,900, and Tachibana has the least amount at 6,900, a total difference of 40,000 health points. And then you can see them ranked from highest to lowest tier. Nice little sandwich of battleships on top, cruisers in the middle, and then destroyers on the bottom. Nothing too exciting about that. Next we go to speed, which we have a little bit of difference here. So all the destroyers are at the top. Obviously Novix is the fastest at 37 knots. Mikasa is the slowest at 18 knots, but Kawachi and Danton actually go faster than Yatsen and Aurora. So they can actually outrun a couple of cruisers. Not by much. It's literally by 0.2 knots and 1 knot, so you're not going to get anywhere fast. But the difference is still there. Obviously, you can see how easy it is for Novik to hunt down Mikasa. It's a difference of, what is that, 19 knots? And it's actually more than twice Mikasa's speed. And when we went over the torpedo damage for all the tier 2 destroyers and cruisers, we were able to figure out that with 8 torpedoes into the side of Mikasa, even though she has the most health, Novik can still one-shot her with just torpedoes alone. And I've done that many times. It's very fun. Going back to main gun range. So this is how far your main battery can shoot. Danton and Mikasa are the top with 12 kilometers and 11.8 kilometers. But then we also have Weymouth at 11.6, which is not far behind. And in fact, there's actually 4 cruisers that can shoot farther than Kawachi, which we mentioned earlier. So yeah, those are definitely have an advantage over Kawachi at least. Then we have Yatsen, a couple destroyers, which actually can shoot farther than Chester. So Wakatake and Novik can actually, well, Wakatake can outshoot Chester. Novik can shoot Chester at the same range at 9.2. Then Samson at 8.5 and Tachibana at 6.7, which is absolute trash. But she's mainly focused on torpedoes, so it doesn't really matter. High explosive alpha, so firing all your guns to one side. How much maximum damage can your high explosive shells do? All the battleships are going to be at the top. However, Aurora is quite close in terms of high explosive alpha for Danton. It's only a difference of 3,600, which is really not that much. That's why Aurora is pretty much just a battleship in a cruiser hull. That's at least how I feel. Her damage numbers are insane. Weymouth is pretty close or pretty high as well at 15,500, and then it drops down to more reasonable numbers. Novik can actually have more high explosive alpha than Chester, and Wakatake and even Tachibana have more than Yatsen, and then Samson is at the very bottom. So she's not a very good high explosive or alpha ship at all. Next we have armor piercing alpha. So again, all the battleships are at the top, but again, Aurora is really close, only differ by about 3,200. But yeah, then we have Weymouth at 15,000. Dresden is pretty up there as well at 12,600. And then we drop down again. Novik again can out damage Chester and straight up alpha. And then Tachibana, Wakatake, and Yatsen all have the same lowest armor piercing alpha of 4,800. So yeah, not really good to be using high armor piercing there either. Next we have torpedo damage. So not surprisingly, all the destroyers have very high torpedo broadside damages versus the cruisers, but we have Novik and Wakatake as pretty substantial amounts, 56,800 and 40,400 respectively. The 40,400 is the second set of torpedoes for Wakatake, and then the others are pretty much all the same at about 24,000 damage. Nothing really there. Weymouth has her 1 torpedo per broadside of 17,100, and then Katori, even though she has 2 torpedoes per side, only has a torpedo broadside of 12,800, which is the lowest. And next we have surface detectability. So we have the lowest detectability at the top and the largest detectability at the bottom. So the ships at the top are the most stealthy, and the ones at the bottom are the least stealthy. Which surprisingly, Weymouth is the least stealthy of all ships at this tier. At 11.8 kilometers, she can be seen, which is more than all the other battleships, even Mikasa at 11.5. And then even Kawachi and Danton are more stealthy than Aurora and Katori, which is kind of surprising. Aurora, not so much because she's a pretty tall and big cruiser. Katori is pretty small though, but she can still be seen from quite a while or ways away. Then we have Chester and Dresden. Yatsen is more stealthy than Samson. A lot of negatives in regards to Samson, but she's still a fun ship, I think. And then Tachibana is the stealthiest, and then Wakatake and Novik are not too far behind. Air detectability, again, this only really entails the Katori float plane, but it's still important, at least in terms of detecting enemy ships, primarily destroyers, I would say. Danton and Kawachi have the worst at 8.3, Mikasa follows soon after, and then all the cruisers, and then all the destroyers. Tachibana is the stealthiest at 2.3 kilometers, so it's a difference of 6 kilometers between Tachibana and Danton. Nice little even sandwich there, no mix matching at all. That does wrap up the review for the, well, tier 2 cruisers, destroyers, battleships, all that. You can kind of see where all these ships have their fortes. Some are better with torpedoes, some are better with gun range firepower and shell velocity, some are better at setting fires. It's pretty much, you learn it throughout the game. The more you play with a ship, the more you figure out the best way to play with it. Some ships, you just run in there and you just launch torpedoes and brawl your heart out. And others, you stay at range and you just don't get close at all. So Novik would be one of those that you can go brawl. You have really fast reloading torpedoes, you have a fast speed, good guns, nothing problem there. And then you have ships, let's see, like Chester, where you don't want to get close at all. You want to stay as far away as possible. So hopefully these reviews are helping. Again, still haven't really had any feedback. I would love some if you have it. But yeah, this will wrap up all reviews for Tier 2 since there are no Tier 2 carriers. And that will bring us to next week. We'll be going over the only Tier 3 destroyer, which is Wix. There's literally just one. So it'll be a really quick video. But for tomorrow's video, we're actually going over the remaining battleships in the Russian tech tree, the newer ones. So we're going to go over Poltava tomorrow. So if you look forward to that, make sure you watch the video. And thank you for watching and have a nice night. Take care.